of the CIA in Canada.
With the publicity wave gathering momentum and the strength of the victim's case becoming more apparent, the CIA caved in the day before the trial was to begin. They settled out of court for $750,000. At the time, it was the largest settlement the CIA had ever awarded, and it provides a dramatic finale for the movie.
Because we made them. They couldn't beat us. We won. You write that down, mister.
Producer Bernard Zuckerman says, besides the financial terms, this was a major moral victory.
Here you've got 9 little Canadian victims taking on probably the most powerful institution in America, the CIA, and these little Canadians, they win. They get the CIA to settle and give them money and, in effect, an apology saying what we did is wrong.
The movie ends with a CIA settlement, but the story didn't end there. Troubling questions would persist, especially about the government of Canada. So why was Ottawa so ambiguous when it came to helping some Canadian citizens get compensation from Washington for what they endured in a program that was inspired mostly by American Cold War fears? Well, the answer was simple. The government of Canada was even more deeply involved in the Allen Memorial experiments than the Americans. Dr. Cameron's experiments were funded to the tune of $500,000 by the Federal Department of Health and Welfare during the 50s, and the funding didn't stop then. They kicked in over $51,000 after the CIA project ended in 1961, which was when a young, stressed-out mother named Linda MacDonald became part of the Allen Memorial story. When she discovered that her own government had been funding brainwashing experiments on her, she made a dramatic decision. You decided to take on the government of Canada.
Oh, sure. Well, hey, considering what I'd already been through, that was a snap. You know, what else? Why not?
It must have become obvious to you fairly quickly that you were ramming your head into a brick wall.
Yes. I'm stubborn, too. It got to the point where every time, whether it was John Crosby or Raina Titian or then the Honorable Kim Campbell, it got to be, you guys, we're gonna stay alive. And I said that to Brian Mulrooney, too. If you think I'm going away, you've got another thing coming. I'm not going to go away.
I finally discovered...
Linda MacDonald would hound the federal government for 4 years before finally in 1992, Ottawa grudgingly agreed to compensate her and some of Dr. Cameron's other victims $100,000 each, in exchange for signing away the right to sue the government or the hospital. But it was an ambiguous victory. Ottawa refused to acknowledge any wrongdoing at the Allen, a conclusion backed up by a legal review of what happened there. The report by a prominent progressive conservative lawyer relied partly on expert advice from Dr. Frederick Grunberg, one of Quebec's leading psychiatrists, who made 2 controversial assertions: that patients hadn't suffered irreparable harm and that they had consented to the treatment.
Well, what I meant is that the patients who were admitted at the Allen Memorial Institute were patients who went in voluntarily. So the sort of consent they gave is what was went on was a sort of general consent to the hospital. The sort of consent that was given for surgery or for any other procedure.
Consent had nothing to do with it. Dr. Cameron did not describe the treatment. He did not clarify. He did not give any way, shape, or form any kind of a hint of what was going to happen. That's not consent. And I don't even know whether he talked to me, because I'll never remember anyway.
Dr. Grunberg shares a widely held view in his profession about the legacy of Dr. Ewan Cameron.
I think he was a misguided man. He worked on a sort of a poor theoretical basis, and I think he was imprudent, considering. But I am convinced, and I'm still convinced, that he really wanted a therapeutic breakthrough. He had this motivation that he was going to break this terrible condition.
You seem to be saying the things that Cameron did were awful, but he meant well, so we'll forgive him. And the victims or the patients will have to live with the consequences.
It's not a question of forgiving. As I say, the thing is, we put what he was doing in the perspective of his time. And a lot of awful things were going on.
A lot of people are saying, considering the accepted practice and the science available at the time, this was an appropriate thing to do to you. What?
It wasn't treatment, if that's what you're suggesting. It wasn't treatment for anything, not a toenail or anything. It was out and out guinea pigs for brainwashing experiments. That's what it was.
It's been more than 33 years since the Allen put an end to the practices initiated by its most notorious doctor. It has recovered its world-class reputation as a leader in the treatment of mental illness. Dr. Peter Roper was dismissed from the Allen 2 years after Dr. Cameron left. One of the reasons, he insisted on following Dr. Cameron's technique. You argued strenuously